recording on OBS. Wait.
Let's go OBS.
I think I am. I got a pause button for some reason now. I've never seen that before. That's new. That's nice. Okay. So just sort of a quick note thing here, because a lot of people are running into this. Premiere is being really frustrating and crashing a lot on people. The multiple tricks that exist to get it to work: open Premiere and then immediately close it again. That's step one. Then you can open Premiere again. I don't know why that's a thing. Okay, but it is. And this is why you have to pay a subscription for this. The second step, and this is the one that's really actually causing it to crash: edit, preferences, and then playback. So you'll see all your preferences here as well. It's this playback option right here. There's this enable Mercury transmit. And if we uncheck that, then we can hit OK, and Premiere will be like 14% more stable, not 100%. That's just not possible. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay, I want to do a couple of house cleaning things really quick before we jump into this. ETSU E3 DIGM students. Is there a share folder here? And then ECGC 2020. So this is a folder. You all have maybe seen this poster floating around outside in the hallway. This is why they don't let me teach any of the visualization classes. And that's because I designed this. Yeah. That's the best I got. Like, this is the extent of my graphic design capabilities. Most of these are stolen. So.
But they're silhouetted.
But they're silhouetted, yeah. So silhouettes are important, y'all. So there are two kind of announcements of things coming up that I wanted you all to be aware of. One is this: we take a trip. Actually, we take multiple trips every year to different conferences, conventions, things that you may find helpful or beneficial in your career. Right? This one we are taking to the East Coast Game Conference. So there's money sort of set aside in the budget for student travel, and we are going to use that money basically to pay for about eight students. We may extend that to 10 if we absolutely have to. Students to go to ECGC in Raleigh. How many of you, has anybody been to that before? Anybody aware of what that is?
Raleigh or the ECGC?
Raleigh.
Raleigh, I've been to Raleigh, North Carolina.
Raleigh is a strange animal. So, Raleigh or ECGC. Well played. ECGC is it's a game developer conference. So it's not like game enthusiasts. It's the studios that are making the games that all exist kind of in that region of the East Coast. We go every year. There's a bunch of talks and panels. There are a lot of people you can talk to from the different studios. It's a great way to kind of rub elbows and meet people. So we're going to have two things. We're going to send 8 to 10 students. We need to know who those 8 to 10 students are, and we're not just going to like pull them out of a hat. We want to pick from the students who really want to go. On top of that, we want to pick from the students who are sort of most poised to benefit from it, right? So there are two different things we're going to have. We're going to have an information meeting a week from this Friday. So we were going to set it up this Friday, but a lot of game design students are actually going to be gone on a different thing that they have to do for a class. So it felt wrong to have that meeting without them because it's the game conference. So 1:30 p.m. in room 285, that's this room. I'm just going to assume that nobody's going to be in here. I may be wrong. I think I'm correct, though. we're going to meet in here, and I'm going to kind of explain what all of this is, what it entails, and you know what we're paying for, how that process works, what's expected of you. And then I'll give you a little over a week from then to kind of apply to that. So there's an application on the there's an application in this same folder on how to apply. But really, I just wanted to give people enough time to get their work together. We're going to sort of, after you've turned that in, you have until Sunday the 16th, 11:59. I'll look at it over those next few days. We'll let you know who has been chosen. So I'll look at it, a couple other faculty members will look at it. And we're going to send the people who, so the priority way we look at it is people who are not going to have another chance to go, right? So we do this trip every year. If this is the last time you're going to be here for this trip, then we'll kind of bump you up priority-wise. And people who are sort of poised to get the most out of it in terms of their work, right? That you're ready to actually start talking to the people at these studios, getting feedback from them. So that's one of the reasons part of the application is submitting some of your work so we can see sort of where you are and like, you know, some people are just like, hey, I'd love to go to Raleigh. They got great food, you know, but I have no interest in games. Or like my demo reel or my portfolio is maybe it's all effects related, but nothing, you know, that would actually show that you could get a job in games. So we're really just wanting to make sure, like, if we have to pick between two students who to go, we want to make sure that we're picking the students that are going to get the most out of it. I'm one of the people who will be looking at that, but I'm not the only one. So it's just kind of a mix of different faculty who will sort of chime in and we'll kind of sort through who are the strongest candidates. Questions about this? I have a link at the very bottom to the folder where I'm pulling this. You'll see it all. It's hanging up outside in the lobby. I know you're going to have lots of questions. There's an info folder or an info document in here as well. You can read through that, and it's kind of like a bullet point of what we're going to be talking about in the information session. If you can't make it to that, I can meet with you sometime afterwards or around that time and kind of give you all the quick version of it or answer any questions you have. Also, you're here in this class with me every Tuesday and Thursday, so I can answer questions for you there. The basic summary of it is your digital media fee is going toward a fund that we use to send you to conferences, and so you will have to buy some stuff up front, but all of that will be reimbursed. So you'll buy like your hotel room, but ETSU will reimburse you for that when you get back. Right? So there are some elements that you'll have to cover. We'll cover hotel room. We'll cover the travel expenses, so you'll get like mileage for the drive there. We're going to have everybody sort of travel in groups of like 3 or 4 and stay in hotel rooms of somewhere between 2 to 4. Anyway, the mileage, the hotel, and the conference admission is all going to be covered by ETSU, though. Some of it, again, you'll have to cover up front, and you'll just be reimbursed for them. So, questions about this? Okay. It's really cool if you've never been to it before. It's got a heavy presence from Epic, Insomniac, Red Storm, a lot of really cool studios there. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, I don't have the flyer for, but they are all over the building too, which is the Digital Media Marathon. It's written on the whiteboard over here. Edge hosts this. They try to host something like this every year. They've batted around a couple of different ideas for the name because it's confusing. But as Sierra said, you will not have to run. That is not what this is about. It's kind of like, the way I would sum it up, it's a game jam except for everything, not just games, right? So it could be an animation jam. Basically what it is 52 hours that they're going to set aside that weekend to crash through one project in a weekend, right? We're going to break up in groups of 2 to 4 people, and they're just going to work, just to work on their own thing. Everybody's welcome. If you already have a team of 2 to 4 people you want to work with, that's cool. If you don't, show up anyway. and there will be other people who don't have a team or other teams that need more people on them, and they can help get you sorted out into a team. There's no like admission to it this time, and I think there will be some prizes. I don't know if they're like monetary prizes or I drew you a nice picture prize, but those have value too. So yes.
When is the actual marathon?
It is January 30th, 7:30 p.m. is when they're going to kick it off. So I think.
Is that when the marathon starts?
Yes, I think.
I think that's just when the signups were.
Yeah, I think that's when
Yeah,
it.
that's when signups are due, I'm pretty sure. Unless it changed.
The 30th is this Thursday. They wouldn't start on a Thursday. The class is Friday.
Yeah, we may need to. Yeah, it would be Friday then. I'm guessing they're gonna start sometime on Friday.
It goes like Friday like through Saturday and Sunday.
I think that's what it is. So check the flyers. But yeah, you're right.
You want to do that?
What? I'm not really paying attention. I'm sorry. Working.
It's not my. You're not my class. It's okay to ignore me.
Tell me after he's done getting it.
I encourage you all to do it. So here's one of the cool things that happens out of it. Sometimes you end up in a group full of people that you didn't know that would make a great fit as a team, right? It's also like a great chance to work on like a full project from beginning to end really quickly, so you get something done, and it literally it can be anything. People have done live action short films. People have done like digital paintings. People have done animated short films. People have done video games. They've done game level designs. Anything that you're wanting to do. What happens is they show up with a theme, and it just has to be related to that theme, right? So they may show up and say something like global warming, and somehow your piece has to apply to that, right? It's probably not going to be global warming. Just putting that out there because I think I'm going to help them figure out what the theme is. So, questions on that? Open to everybody, or at least all digital media students. I'm pretty sure if you're not a digital media student, they're all right with that too. And it's something that Edge hosts just to kind of get your creative juices flowing. So.
When is it? Like, what's the duration?
I think it's this weekend. The flyers are
I
outside.
just checked the thing. It's Friday through Sunday.
Friday through Sunday. Yeah, I'm not for sure exactly what time it starts on Friday, but yeah, that's probably on the flyer too. Yes.
Could you sign up and then like halfway through you don't want to finish it or something? You just like give up and
You have to cut off one of your thumbs if that's the. Yeah, like, with a rusty butter knife. So yeah, it's pretty rough, but I don't think anybody's gonna. I don't think that there's gonna be like a requirement for it. No, I think you could. I mean I think that there's some people who will be like, finished it in 15 hours, I'm out. Like, but I think that it's all voluntary stuff. So yeah, it's come do what you want to do, and different people are going to be able to put different amounts of time into it. I think we all understand that. So they used to try to do it right before this semester started, and that way you would have like it's kind of like a warm up for the semester. So instead they just tried to do it as early as they could in the semester, so people were still not in the thick of the worst of it yet. Okay, any other questions on this? Okay. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't prepare for class. All that time, and I didn't open Maya. Give me 1 second here to get this open. And actually, so just walking around, I think there's actually some pretty cool stuff y'all are working on. It feels like everybody's kind of getting to a pretty good spot. Let me, 1 second here to open Maya. Okay. So, from D2L, wanted to kind of briefly look at this. We are here. So we're actually doing really good. Like we got a decent amount of time. This is a great place to be in blocking. Hopefully from your feedback, what you got was some notes on how to make it better. What I wanted to look at is what's coming up next, which is blocking plus. Right? What does that mean?
Revising it, maybe blocking it more in between.
Yeah, blocking plus some more, right? Like really, that is kind of what it is. A lot of people will call this blocking plus, but really, this is the extra keyframes that you're going to need in order to sort of refine this motion, right? Think of it as blocking. You were defining the motion, right? This blocking plus, you're refining it more to more clearly show how you want that action to take place, right? A lot of people refer to this as a different name. They call it the breakdown pass, right? I actually have a tendency probably to call it breakdown as well. I use them pretty interchangeably, but really, if what we were making in our blocking phase was our key poses, our most essential poses, like pose A and pose B, what we're going to be doing in this pass is trying to show in another keyframe or with more keyframes how we got from pose A to pose B, right? Your character is raising their hand up in the air. Like, there's a million different ways that could happen, right? How does it look halfway through that motion of raising your hand up in the air? And if we create a breakdown key to show how that transition should be happening, then Maya is going to get it a little closer, right? Now, I'm going to be referring to Maya quite a bit here. Recognize that all of this applies to 2D animation as well. It's just a little bit of a different process. So that's what we're going to be looking for next class period. I'll be honest, you're probably not going to have your blocking, or you're probably not going to have your breakdowns finished by next class period. I just like to see progress toward it. I also think that what we're probably going to do, and actually we can just go ahead and do it now if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and say Control-C and just move our splining deadline a little bit later. The reason for that is because I'd like to give you a little bit more time to finish up your blocking plus after that. So we probably will still, I'd like to do one more review at the beginning of next class of where you're at that point. But then we'll give you a little bit of work time on it. Hopefully these reviews are beneficial though. Hopefully you're getting something out of them. You're getting feedback. I think it's good to be talking animation, even if just that process of getting together with other animators and talking about your pieces, it's kind of like it gets your thoughts in the right space. But the other thing is maybe you're with your group and you're critiquing somebody else's piece, and somebody has a comment about part of it that is not directed toward yours, but you learn something from that, right? It's just like the benefit of having your head in that headspace for that much time really just keeps you in the right frame of mind. Working in isolation it always ends up bad. So even if you're not finished, even if you're a little behind where you want to be, still meet up with your group, still get that feedback, still get that information about it, and that camaraderie. Raise my thing here a little bit. Okay. So blocking plus or breakdowns. Let's talk about that. So we mentioned last class period, obviously, we're really strongly focused on building strong poses. one of the things I did kind of fail to mention is, and this kind of has come up in both classes, is that when I'm setting my key poses for the blocking, I'm usually setting keyframes on all of the controllers for my character, right? In the same way that, the way to think about this is like, if you set 3 keyframes, right? Let's say you set keyframe on frame 1, and you set a keyframe on everything, right? And then you set a keyframe on frame 5, but you don't change the arms, right? You don't set a keyframe on the arms. Well, when you're looking at frame 5, it looks like the arms are kind of in the same position that they were on 1, right? But then you go on out to frame 10 and you create a keyframe on everything, including raising the arms up in the air. Well, when you go back to frame 5, the arms aren't going to be in the same place anymore, right? It's going to transition from 1 to 10 instead of 5 to 10. So what we usually do is we set a keyframe on everything, and every rig is a little different on how you grab everything, right? I'll show you how to do it on this guy, and it's pretty handy. If I open up my script editor, the Boney rigs, anybody using the Boney rigs? Oh, that's cool. Yeah, these are good rigs. So the person who rigged it actually did a pretty good job of fixing this for us. If we look at all of our curves here, if I drag select them, it looks like I got everything, except for there's some IK controllers that are hidden. And if I need those later in the animation, that means there's half of this that there's part of this rig I'm not keying, right? So to select everything, all the way down here at the bottom, there's this Ultimate Boney version 1.0 Boney All Controls. And if I click that, this is all the controls you'll need to animate the character. Now that's just something that the person who rigged it created for us, right? Not all of them have that, but I can usually help you find that list of all the controls if you need it. Most good rigs have something like this though. So what I can do is I can select all of those, and now I've selected all the controls that I need to animate the character. Now what I like to do so I don't have to go over here and constantly hold shift and do that, is if I just go to my custom tab, I can make a button that helps me pick that, right? So if I open up my script editor down here in the bottom corner here, I know most of you have seen this before, but anytime I select something, you'll see that I get this little piece of mail script that says I selected that bone RNE IKC, right? So what I want to do is I want to be able to create a script that selects everything. So if I go to Edit, Clear All, it's going to wipe everything out. And then I can go over here and select the first control, as Root C. Scroll down, hold Shift, select the bottom one. And so now this piece of script right here will select my entire character, right? That's just like that text will. Obviously, I'm not going to write that text out every time I want to select my character. So if I highlight it and I middle mouse click, drag it onto my shelf up here and release it, it will say, what type of script is this? It's a mail script. And now I get a button that will select everything for me. Okay, so whenever I click that button, it fires off that script that just dropped down there. Okay. This is a nice way of automating a lot of different processes. If you just want to select the arm, you can go through and click all the buttons you need to for the arm, select that text, and you can have an arm button, right? So this is a really nice way of making sure I have everything selected. So I'm just going to select the head control, and then I'm going to turn off my NURBS curves. And the reason I'm doing that is so now I can still see my keyframes down here along the bottom, because the head has keyframes on everything, but you can just pay attention to the pose. Now, what I've done is I've made a couple of poses here that we're going to call them Pose A and Pose B, right? Pose A, our character is seeing something interesting to his right, to the character's right. Pose B, something interesting happened to his left, right? So it's a very simple like transition, looking from one direction to the other, right? Pose A, Pose B. So, so we've all used Maya long enough to know how Maya is going to transition between those two poses, right? How Maya wants to get us from pose A to pose B is pretty much a straight line, right? It's just gonna blend from A to B. Which sometimes is what you need, but not usually with characters, because characters usually don't blend from pose to pose, right? So Maya, if it were going to create a breakdown key for this, if it were going to create a key that defined the transition, it would look like this, right? That is literally halfway between pose A and pose B. Like if I just set this to automatic tangents, Maya's like, I know what you're looking for. It's this pose right here. Now, we talked about this in when we were looking at those demo reels, right? You can pause that at any point in those animations and kind of understand what's going on based off of the strength of the pose, right? That means that it's constantly communicating what the animator wanted you to know about that motion. What do you think they want you to know about this pose? Like, what is this pose saying? I'll wait for it. Nothing? Gassy? Like, I hurt my back? Like this pose says nothing, right? This pose is Maya just like doing it for you, and you as an artist have no control, right? So what we're going to do is our breakdown poses to make sure this transition tells the story, communicates the thing we want it to. We can alter this breakdown pose, right? And there's some alterations that are really simple, right? Like if we look at the one we just had, right? Like look at what the head does. It just kind of blends across, right? It goes from there, it's just sort of a slow blend across, and that's boring, right? We could just add an arc to this. We could just have the head dip as it's traveling across, right? Just add like a dip in that up to this. Now that's exaggerated and a little bit more cartoony, like a take, you know, like what was that, right? But that breakdown at least is you taking some control and manipulating the way this transition happens, right? So I think the thing to remember here is like there's not a single way this can happen. That breakdown is going to change the way that motion communicates, and there's an infinite number of options for that. If you wanted to make the character feel a little more like they're like taking a sigh, right? They're like and looking in the other direction. Maybe you would arc the character up, right? You get this like that transition. So arcs aren't the only reasons we do this. I mean, it's nice that you can add some more arcs in there because that is one of the 12 principles. But one of the other 12 principles is ease in and out, or slow in and out. You remember that one? Okay, so what do I mean when I say the word spacing? What am I talking about?
The distance, the difference in like position between one keyframe and another keyframe.
Well, kind of. I think you're getting at. So it's the distance that an object travels from frame to frame, right? So like let me pull this up really quick so you can see it. I go to lectures and fundamentals. Slow in and out. So spacing is the distance this object is traveling from here to here in a single frame, right? Now, if the spacing is big, what does that say about the motion?
Go real fast.
It's going faster, right? The spacing is small. So what if the spacing is, it's going slow. So what if the spacing is big at first and gets smaller and smaller and smaller?
Slowing down.
Yeah, it's slowing down, so decelerating, right? So this is what we're talking about when we say slow in and slow out, or ease in and ease out. We're talking about the spacing, the space that object travels from frame to frame. So we got this motion that happens here, right? And these are actually the same timing. Right? This is the object is traveling the same distance in the same number of frames, 10 frames from one side to the other, right? The only difference in this motion is the spacing, right? The ease in, the ease out. If we look at this image, you can see an image of each frame, and you'll see that the space that the top one is traveling is the same every frame, so that's even spacing. And then the bottom one, we have small spacing that accelerates and gets to be bigger, right? So we can use, and that's why we get this different result in the motion. So we can use these breakdowns to increase our spacing too, right? If I want to ease out of pose A and go fast into pose B, then I could just have a breakdown that is more like pose A. Right? So it's just a very subtle change. And then from the breakdown to B is a bigger change. Right? And what that's going to look like is like it's easing out of this and going fast into that end pose. Right? So, of these 12 principles, and trust me, we can hit all 12 of them if we have to. I'm not going to go through them one by one. We can start using these breakdowns to accentuate those 12 principles, the things that are making this have more personality and character. And so one of those was overlapping action and follow through. Do y'all remember that one? What's that one mean?
It means if there's a thing, it moves after the thing.
Thing moves after the thing. Absolutely. That is actually correct. So it is the way I like to think of follow through and overlapping action. Not everything starts and stops at the same time, right? Actually, I have a talk that I can give on follow through and overlapping action, and I probably, you know what? Let's just put that in there now. Where would we put that? I'd like to get it in here, but I'd also like y'all to have some work days. So let's put it here, but I'm sorry, you all can't even see this. I'm on the schedule on this other screen here. So I may put this on during one of the work days, like maybe when splining is due or something like that. So what I can do is I can build some drag or some follow through, some evidence of that overlapping action into my key pose, right? Now, usually what we think of when we think of follow through and overlapping action, we think of offsetting our keys, like we have them happen at different times, and that is one element that we can use for that, particularly in 3D. But other elements of this is actually just building that drag, building that sense that physics is affecting things differently into your breakdown, right? So if I step through to my breakdown here, sorry, wrong screen. I can just add some drag on the hands, right? Now, this brings up a term that I like to call lead and follow. Most people call it that, but it's something you're going to hear me refer to a lot. So not everything happens at the same time. Not everything starts and stops at the same time. And so that means usually one part of the body is leading and the other parts are following, right? Or certain parts are leading while other parts are following. And in this case, if we look at how this transition happens, it feels like the hips are leading. They go first, right? And it feels like the head and the arms are kind of dragging behind. Right, so the hips sort of go forward, the head and the arms are kind of dragging, and then toward the end they all kind of catch up. Right? Again, these are all different breakdowns that just describe this motion differently. Lead and follow is interesting, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit more. Let's see, is it? No, it's up here. Yeah, so here's some more lead and follow. One of the things I would say to recognize is you don't just have to have one breakdown for a motion. Like you're just defining this motion more clearly. And so if you're defining it more clearly, that means you just use as many breakdowns as you need, right? I've literally broken down a shot to every frame before, to where I was setting a keyframe on everything for every frame for a stretch of time, not for the full animation. So for example, on this one, maybe this first breakdown, I wanted to show that there's some drag on the hands, there's some drag on the head, but the foot is leading the action, right? The foot is leading forward, pulling the hips down. The hands and head are going to drag behind. And then the next breakdown is to show that I still want to push it pretty deep to come up into this pose, right? And so now you can see that, kind of defining that transition with more than one keyframe, more than one breakdown. So here's another example of that breakdown. So again, lead and follow. So imagine this. Imagine I'm having a conversation with somebody I really like, and it's a really interesting conversation right here, right? And then somebody is just say, hey Marlo, hey Marlo, hey Marlo, over on that side of the room, right? And I'm really into this conversation. The way I'm going to turn to that person who says, hey Marlo, is my lower body may be turning, but I'm still finishing up this conversation, and then my head and everything sort of follows through and catches up. My hips are leading, my head is following through, right? And so just by changing the order in which that happens, I'm changing the intent. I'm changing what the audience can read in that character's mind, right? The alternative is maybe I'm having this conversation with this person and I'm really getting annoyed with this conversation. I'm like, why do we keep having to have this debate, right? And I hear a friend come through the door that I haven't seen in years, right? The way that may happen is when I hear them, my head may go first before the rest of my body is even done talking over here. And then the rest of my body follows through, right? So that means my head is leading, possibly my eyes are leading. If you were to watch it, you may see my eyes go this way before the rest of my head even starts to turn, right? So that is all where we're talking about overlapping action. These things are happening at different orders, and they're going to tell you something about this performance just in the order and in the way that happens. Well, we can build some of that in there. That second scenario where the character is kind of distracted and eagerly turns their head, right? We can start our breakdown just by having the character turning their head before the rest of their body starts to move, right? So they turn their head and they're leading with their head. They still continue to lead with their head and drag the arm kind of behind, and then everything catches up, right? So what we're defining with these breakdowns are informative to the viewer, right? The viewer is going to learn something from them more than just this simple transition, right? There's lots of things we can embed in this. I think it's also important to recognize that these transitions should also be able to withstand that pause test. If you hit pause anywhere on here, hopefully that's still a strong pose, right? If you do that, if all of your poses continue to be strong and you keep making sure that they're strong, then Maya is more likely to end up transitioning in a strong way. Like the poses that Maya generates is more likely to be a strong pose as well. If you make a stinker right there in the middle of it and it's not a very good one, then Maya is not going to invent something good for you, right? Maya is only going to use the information you've given it. I will say I'm referring to Maya a lot. I know there's a lot of people doing 2D animation. Recognize that all Maya is your in-betweener, right? If you're doing 2D animation, that just means you're manually in-betweening. We all kind of manually in-between once we get to the graph editor anyway. So really what this is telling you is if you have strong keyframes and strong breakdowns, then when you're manually in-betweening, that part's going to be much easier for you because you're going to have all the information you need on how to make those in-betweens happen, right? So, so that's why this still applies across the board. It applies to stop motion as well. Okay, got a couple more of these to get through here. So I think we can also really play around with the idea of follow through or overshoot. So when we talk about overshoot, I'm moving this object from point A to point B. What overshoot is before pose B, like before I get to this, I can set another keyframe where I actually go past pose B. And what that's going to end up doing is it's going to go past it and come back, right? That's the opposite of ease in, or the opposite, but like ease in is like it gradually slows to a stop. This is like, whoop, went too far, settle back to it, right? And that you'll see that a lot in like hard or fast motions, right? Like if you move your arm down like that, you're going to overshoot it and pop back up. So, so one of the things we can do is overshoot in some angle or direction, right? So as our character is starting here, like we get like some drag in the head, right, drag in the arms, and then the next pose I'm going to have is the character going too far, right? It's like he threw himself too far a little bit that side, and then he kind of settles back into the last pose, right? And so if you watch that, it kind of feels like it has like a springiness to it, right? There really is not a limit to the number of breakdowns you can set in this, though. I mean, I guess there's a limit in the number of keyframes actually exist in between those two poses. But, I mean, it's as many as you need to define that action you need to happen, right? So I may do, like, the foot is leading, arms are dragging. We dip low, continuing to drag the arms in order to get a really interesting arc. I overshoot a little bit to the side-to-side direction. I keep pushing the character upward. He overshoots a little bit in height and then settles back. Okay? And so if we watch that now, it feels like that. That's what. So again, there really isn't. There's an infinite number of combinations on how you can make this action happen. Like this is really pushing it. All of that is still getting, like, this is a drastically different transition than anything else we've seen before, just because I'm pushing the breakdowns. It's still the same key poses, still the same frame A and frame B, but like that is way more drastic than that A to B, right? And so I think that that's really the most important thing for you to remember is this is the landscape where you actually get to do your art. This is the part that you get to express some creativity. You're going to pull some of this information of what's going on from your reference, but you also get to push that in ways that makes it creatively yours. My 2 cents, actually the blocking and the breakdowns phase is my favorite part of it. Right? This is where I really enjoy pushing it and it becomes mine, right? I did want to take a minute to talk about that tween machine script that we looked at the other day. So let's go ahead and install that again, or I'm going to. Let's see, ETSUE 3, Greg, character animation, resources, and it's this tween machine 3.0. So I'll copy that. I may already have this on my desktop. Nope, I don't. I'll extract this. And there we go. And so the way we install this is actually pretty easy. Tween machine. Let me go ahead and open up my script editor. So again, down here underneath my play button, right over here, I get the script editor. I'll open that up. I'll open up the Python tab and go Edit, Clear All. And then in that tween machine folder, you'll see that there's a Python folder. If I open that up, it's this tween machine Python script. This is just the icon if you wanted to create an icon for it. So I'll just drag this into the Python section here. And so this is the script now. This is the thing that is going to do all the math, all the calculations for you. I'm going to hit Control A to select everything. And then I can middle mouse drag this into my custom shelf again. It's going to, well, it didn't ask me if it was Mel or Python this time. It just recognized it as Python. And so now this button right here will launch the tween machine. So what this is going to do is it's going to help you make better breakdown keys, mainly just by saving you some time. So you remember that first scenario we had where I was sort of trying to get something with well, not the first scenario, like the lead and follow that we were looking at earlier. So I have right here pose A, pose B, right, these two. Really what my breakdown tool is going to do, my Tweet machine is going to do, is if I go halfway in between this, even if I'm in stepped mode, I can create a percentage of pose A or a percentage of pose B. Now this is going to be based off of what I have selected. Currently I just have the head selected, so I'm going to select everything. And what I can do is say, you know what, I want this to really favor my first pose. So I can drag that back to say like 67. And so my breakdown now is going to be much more like frame 67. Now, if you start getting this error that I'm getting right here where your rig starts falling apart, that's actually not the rig breaking, believe it or not, because if I were to grab this control and move it around, my rig comes back together, right? Strangely, what this is nothing to do with Tween Machine. If I go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, under Animation, I can change this to DG and hit Save, and it really doesn't give me that error anymore. So again, this is how the graphics card is processing this. Just a lot of graphics cards issues lately. So just so we can see this a little better, I'm going to frame this from 420 to 430. And I think you all have seen this already. Let's do like more like 440. I think you all have seen this already. You can adjust the height of the timeline now, time slider, if you want to be able to see your timeline better. So I'll do it like that where you can see it a little bit better. Now again, select everything, step through that. So the Tween Machine is not going to give you a finished breakdown. It's just going to be a helper. So for example, if I wanted this to really feel like the hips were leading, what I could do is have the hips tween something a little more like this, right? And then I could drag the character this way, sort of drag the spine a little bit. I can also use the Tween Machine on just parts of the model. I could do something like this, right? Whatever it is we want to do with it. And I can build this like drag into the pose, right? If I had auto key on, I could at least. Let's try that again. S. And so what I'm getting now is this, where it feels like the hips are moving first, right? Maybe I push the character's weight down a little bit. Right? And one of the other things you'll notice is that my hands are kind of just moving with it. I could add some drag to this. I could rotate this arm forward, a little bit of something like this. Rotate this one a little bit more like this. And so with all of that now, looks like the arms are dragging behind and catching up, right? Maybe a little much on that arm. So again, all of this is very nice options. One of the other things I can do, see if this will let me do it, options. So I have this overshoot option I can turn on the Tween Machine. And what that'll do is let me go past this, this frame, right? So I can go out here and set a keyframe on this. And what I could do is extend this to 120% of pose B, and it'll go past it. So now what I get, oh, it's still in stepped mode. Let me set this here really quick. Tangents, stepped. So we get this overshoot now, right, where it goes a little bit past it. Now that overshoot is never exactly right. I always feel like I have to tweak that just a little bit to make it feel a bit more natural. Okay. Is this making sense? Anybody? Make sense? All right. So let's go ahead and minimize this. So where we were last time in class, or when I was going through this, I walked through that little girl turning the flip, right? We had it up to the blocking pass of this, and so some of you will remember this is how it looked in sort of auto mode. Had lots of little issues in it, right? Lots of little like weird flips that the character is doing. Let me set this to repeat so I can watch it. So again, that little like weird twist that she does right at the end, that's just a little glitch. This is not the time to be worrying about that. The part we're going to be looking at, again, we're still in stepped mode. There we go. So these are our key poses. These are just the key poses. What I'm going to do now is go through the process of breaking these down and sort of defining those actions a little bit more creatively, right? So I have this time-lapse video, and I'll kind of just watch it. We'll walk through it. So the first thing I start doing is making sure, again, you'll see me using the tween machine there to help me with the breakdowns, is to make sure I'm getting all of the important steps, right? Literally the keyframes for all of the steps, contact down, passing up. You'll all remember those from previous classes. And so the first thing I did is I'm kind of making sure all of those are in place to make her run make sense, right? She's running up to this thing. A couple little things to notice, like right here. This is one of the first frames that you will see her when she's walking on or running on the screen. So right here. So again, you're thinking of silhouette no matter how much of her is showing, right? And so all you really see is her face and her hand. If that's all you're going to see, I'm going to make sure it's good, right? So I'm going to put that hand in a stronger pose. Again, all of these poses as she's moving, just making sure that I'm hitting all the physical elements needed to make that run look correct. And again, pulling as much of that reference as I can from the, or informed, making the most informed decisions I can about those poses based off of what I'm seeing in the reference, right? This kid is running up to the tree with this anticipation. He's going to run up the tree and do a flip. So I'm making sure she looks like she's eager to get there. And you'll see that whenever I get the chance to use the tween machine, I'm using it to help me save time. Now I really like this pose, these next few poses that I'm working on here, because like I'm getting stuff from the reference that I never would have guessed, right? Look how much her foot is bent underneath her. She's literally like kicking herself in the butt. And the reason for that is because she's sort of squashed down, because that's the squash before the jump, right? So she's having to squash down and tuck that leg under, because she's going to have to get that leg out there in just a second to catch herself on that tree. Right? So again, going through everything, making sure it's all very appropriate. You'll see me, when I'm going to the back side of this, I'm tumbling around the character to make sure, even though we're looking at it through our render cam, the way I can ensure that I don't have any problems in there is to make sure that she's doing the right thing from all angles as well. So as she starts going up the tree here, this is actually probably the hardest part of the animation. You may not realize this because you would think the hardest part of the animation would be the hardest part of what you would really do, right? The flip, right? That would be difficult. It's really not that bad. The hardest part for me is figuring out what's going on in the physics as she runs up this tree, right? So like one of the little telltale elements here, she only has one foot supporting her on that tree, and she still does a twist on her toe, which means that foot really isn't even supporting that much weight, right? It's because she's launched herself up. It's really a jump up in the air, and she's using that tree to guide herself as she goes up in the air and does this twist, right? So there's a lot of really complicated physics happening in here. And that's the hard part, is like eventually she gets to the top of that tree, she can't stay there forever, she would just slide down. So what we're actually seeing is this twist, and her getting ready to sort of throw herself forward for the flip, right? Because otherwise she's just going to fall out of the tree. So you're seeing me again posing some of these controls, trying to get something that feels a little more interesting, appealing to look at. Again, thinking about that line of action, I turned her spine there. Something I like to do, I like to think of the three main masses that are on the body. So you have your pelvis, you have your rib cage, and you have your skull. If those three masses ever change shape, you die, right? So those are things that are pretty consistent throughout your body. Their placement isn't, right? And so we can, if we squash those closer together, if we squash our pelvis and our rib cage closer together, then we can make our character stretch and squash. The same as if I stretch my head further away from my rib cage, I can make the neck squash and stretch. And so these are little things I'm thinking about and how they all relate to each other in order to get that cleaner line of action. This is that hard part again I was telling you about. She's throwing her body toward the ground, and at the same time, launching her butt up in the air. And that's what's going to get that centrifugal force to get her to do the flip. Right? Something else I kind of have to think about in this is the arc that she takes as she's doing this flip. You'll see me kind of cleaning up that line of action a little bit, making sure that our spine feels nice and clean on the curves for it. And a lot of the last little bit that we look at here is me getting this this little landing that she does here. I want to get a little bit of overshoot in her arms and give her time to get back in that final pose and settle into it. So I have her arms kind of follow through after they land, and then she kind of rolls up on her toes to do this jump backwards. Again, I'm sort of thinking about overlapping action here too, because I realize that I'm going to have one of her feet hit on that landing just a little bit earlier than the other, and so I kind of built that into the pose. It's that drag that I was talking about, building that into it. She's such a tough little kid. I don't want to tangle with this kid. She's mean. Her neck looks messed up there. I think I fixed that later, but. I will be going back to this. Her pupils get more dilated because she's gonna kick your butt. That was like up close, which is like coming at you. Okay, so I think that's the end of it. That entire process lasts about an hour. Like that was about an hour's worth of blocking or breakdowns. It is probably my favorite part, and a lot of times breakdowns take a little bit longer than that. So don't expect this is something you can crank out in an hour. The other thing to recognize is that as you're doing this, you're going to start seeing problems with the original poses you had or that you made, right? Don't ignore those. Like fix those poses as you're doing this, because if you make breakdowns for bad poses, you're just going to have to delete those breakdowns too. All right, is that making sense? Let me show you where it's at the end of this. So again, this is where it's at, sort of in the stepped process, right? I hate this media player. Okay. So I like looking at it like this, right? Because even after all of that keying, this is what it looks like splined. It just looks bad, right? Like it's all over the place. Like it's like little things are hitching. I can tell that the timing feels off. And so this is one of the things I feel like is important to address at this point, right? Is that animation is very frustrating sometimes, in that it's not gratifying quickly, right? You don't get a lot of like instant gratification from animation. Like I used kind of modeling as an example. For modeling, like you're like, all right, I'm going to model a train, right? And you create a box, and you're like, oh man, look how much I've gotten done already, right? Like, it's like you just clicked a button, and suddenly you have mesh. And it's like, yeah, and it's kind of even roughly in the right shape. And then you start extruding a couple of things, and like 15, 20 minutes, you're like, yeah, I'm really making progress. It's starting to look like a train. Eventually, you will hit a wall on that, and you'll be like, a few hours in, and you're like, I do not know how in the world to make this like look like the right thing. Like, you're going to hit stuff like that, but early on, you get these little like feedback loops of, I did a thing, and I felt good about it, right? Animation doesn't have that. Like animation, you have to do a lot of stuff before you start feeling good about it. And if I were to have looked at this after what is about 8 hours of work, I'd have been like, what is wrong with me? Like, what? Like I'm not a professional. Like I'm fake. Right? This is actually called imposter syndrome. Yeah. Lots of people have this, right? And my wife can tell you how many times I came home from work from Firaxis being like, I'm not really good at animation. Please don't tell anybody. And she would be like, just shut up. You're fine. And the next day you'd go in and I would be able to make it work, right? But you get this feeling of like, man, this should be working. Like, I've been practicing this long. So I think it's worth acknowledging that is just innately part of how animation is, right? And since we are animals that like to have that feedback loop, like that positive feedback loop. I did a thing, it felt good, so I did it again, right? We have to kind of build those into our process. That's why I don't look at it like this when I'm working on it, right? I look at it at the one that makes me feel good about it, right? The one that I can say, that was an accomplishment, right? Or maybe I pause it on one pose that I was really happy with, and I'm like, yeah, that pose is awesome. Right, I'm really digging that one pose. Even this end pose, I'm really happy with that pose. And just that pose alone, I can work in a way that I can allow that to be my positive feedback, right? That's the thing that makes me feel good about doing this is I accomplished that pose, right? And you're like, yeah, but that's one of like 100 that you have to do. I'm like, yeah, but I got that one right. And if I trust the process and keep doing what I'm doing, by the time I get to the end, I'll have that really big feedback loop. That one that goes, yeah, that looks awesome. That was my shot, right? And I think it's important to acknowledge this in animation because you're going to feel like you're doing it wrong for a long time because you don't get that feedback loop very easily, right? And so continuing to focus on the element that you're working on, if you're working on blocking, focus just on those poses. How strong are those poses, right? Are they communicating the action you want to be communicating with just a pose? When you get to this blocking plus, focus on that transition. Am I transitioning well from frame 10 to frame 20, right? And if you focus on those little things, then those can be those positive rewards you're getting. Those can be those feedback loops you're getting. Now, I think the other thing that is really important to this is that feedback process, right? And so when we have you all, hop into groups and chat with people, there's a lot to that, right? a lot of people have a really hard time asking for feedback on something that is not done. And it's because really when people are asking for feedback, they're really asking for compliments. Right? And a lot of times they're like, hey, I've been working really hard on this. Tell me it looks awesome and I'm done. That's what you're looking for. And when you show somebody the piece and they say, yeah, that's looking good, but maybe you should work on this part a little bit longer, or I don't really understand what's going on here. Like that's just rough. Parker is in my previous class, and he said it's like somebody telling you that you have an ugly baby, right? Like, and I said, well, the problem with that is you're approaching them with the wrong idea. Like you're not finished. Like you should be approaching them saying, hey, I know my baby's ugly. Do you have any recommendations for good masks that I can put on my baby? So people will not recognize, or maybe there's some makeup I could get for my baby that is not going to irritate its skin, right? Like you should just assume your baby is ugly, right? The thing to acknowledge is if you keep taking care of it, you keep feeding it banana baby food and like don't let it like put sharp things in its mouth, someday it's going to grow into those eyebrows and it's going to look just fine. So like the thing to recognize about this is that you have to trust the process, right? And when you ask somebody for feedback, you should be asking it at a time when it actually is going to make a positive impact on your work, right? And that's one of the reasons I'm kind of forcing you all to do these things every day where we meet every day and get feedback from each other. And I know that people are going to be going into it like nervous to show it because it doesn't feel finished, or you're worried that people are going to think you don't know what you're doing. Tell them you do. So I know what I'm doing, but I just got these 3 keys done. Can you tell me what you think of these 3 keys, right? Or whatever the situation is. Like, people should understand at this point you're not finished. We've only been doing this for a week and a half, right? So I think that the hard thing is getting up and asking for that feedback, right? Getting up and saying, hey, can you come look at my ugly baby, right? I've known people who, this is an aside, I've known people who had babies that were like, oh, that's a weird looking baby. And that baby grew up and it looks just fine now, okay? So like, it is a perfectly normal looking human being. Their heads are too big, right? So, but I think it's a pretty good analogy for this. Like you have to approach it wanting to get better at it. If you approach it wanting a compliment, that's when it hurts, right? When somebody tells you what to do. So, questions, comments about any of this progress? So how many people, again, are repeating this class, that this is character animation 2 or 3 for you? All right. So I'm going to mix it up just a little bit here for you. Do you all have any input? Like, do you all have things that you would say about this part of the process, or about like blocking, breakdowns, just advice? Because you've all been through this project before, and you have felt what they're going through right now. Anything that you would chime in?
Don't feel ashamed to start over from scratch.
Oh, absolutely. I know. Like
Sometimes you break it so much, it's better just to erase it and start over.
And I will say, like, people get nervous about that because they think they're losing something. You're not. You gained knowledge of how not to do that, right? Sometimes I will do an animation with a character rig with the sole intentions of throwing it away when I'm done, right? Like, I just need to learn how to use the rig. Earlier in class, who was it? I think it was Jared, was showing me an animation he had, and it looked really good, but he had used the wrong spine, right? So he was basically going to have to reanimate the entire thing with a different spine. Like he had the FK spine. Like, this would work a lot better with the IK spine. Just rekey that whole thing. But I guarantee, like, that process of going back and just redoing all of the spine for the entire animation is going to make the animation more successful in less amount of time than just continuing to fight with the thing that's not working. So I think that's good advice. I think it's also good advice once you get to the revision phase of it. If something's not working, like, don't fight with it. I mean, I don't want to say that. Fight with it for a little while, but if you're like, this just isn't going to work, it's perfectly fine to save that file, delete that section you're having problems with, and just redo that part, right? And see if you can make it work better by tackling it a different way, right? So that's good advice. Other advice y'all would pass down? Sage wisdom.
Save often.
Save often, yes. All right. Okay, any other comments, questions about breakdowns, animation, ugly babies, going once, going twice? All right, I'm pretty sure I actually recorded class this time. Let me look and see. It says it's recording, so we're gonna see what happens. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this. I'll upload it to YouTube. I also have the previous class if you want to watch that one as well. It was very similar. Otherwise, it's 4:08, so we're actually done about an hour early, almost. Yeah, so the rest of the class is yours. You can either hang around here and keep working on some stuff. Again, blocking plus is what we're going to look at next class period. So you probably do want to make sure you got some work time dedicated toward that. But otherwise, the rest of the class is yours, and I will. You can let